The biting wind cut through James Carter's thin jacket as he walked out of the gas station, his boots scuffing against the cold pavement. He had just spent his last few dollars filling up his old pickup, enough to make it home, but not enough to change his reality. His little girl, Emily, was waiting for him, and he didn't know how he was going to put food on the table that night. Bills were piling up. His job as a mechanic had been slow, and his landlord was already hinting at eviction. He clenched the last $10 bill in his pocket, his only safety net. As he stepped toward his truck, he noticed her, a woman huddled near the side of the convenience store, wrapped in a tattered coat, her arms tucked tightly around herself. Her face was weathered, her eyes downcast. A cardboard sign rested beside her, but the wind had blown it slightly askew. James glanced at it, hungry. Anything helps. He swallowed hard. He knew that kind of hunger, the kind that gnawed at you, the kind that made you feel invisible. Emily had gone to bed hungry just the other night, and the thought of another person suffering that same way twisted his gut. His fingers tightened around the $10 bill in his pocket. That money could buy Emily a small meal. It wasn't much, but it was something. And yet. James exhaled slowly, then walked toward the woman. "Ma'am," he said, kneeling beside her. She looked up, startled, as if she wasn't used to being acknowledged. I don't have much. But maybe this can help." He pressed the $10 bill into her cold fingers. "Get yourself something warm to eat, all right?" The woman blinked up at him, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But no words came. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. James patted her hand gently and stood, offering her a small, tired smile before turning back toward his truck. As he drove home, doubt crept in. He had no idea how he'd explain to Emily why there was no dinner that night. But deep inside, a quiet sense of peace settled over him. He had done the right thing. Somehow, that had to count for something. The woman sat there for a long time after James left, staring at the $10 bill in her hand. It wasn't about the money, it never had been. She had once been one of the wealthiest women in the city. Olivia Sinclair, the billionaire CEO of a global tech company. But after the loss of her son in a tragic accident, she had walked away from everything, shedding her fortune, her status, her entire life. She had wandered for months, seeking something real, something that money couldn't buy. And in all that time, she had seen the worst of humanity, people turning away, pretending not to see her. But then, this man, this struggling father who clearly had next to nothing, had stopped. He had seen her. And without hesitation, he had given all he had left. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This was the kind of wealth money could never buy. A life-changing call the next morning. James was up early, trying to figure out how to stretch what little food he had left for Emily's breakfast. The knock at the door startled him. When he opened it, he found a well-dressed man standing there. Behind him, a sleek black car idled at the curb. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked. James nodded warily. "I work for Olivia Sinclair. She asked me to find you." James's stomach dropped. "Who?" The man handed him a business card. "The woman you helped last night." James blinked. That was impossible. She had been homeless. She wants to meet with you. The man smiled. And she'd like to discuss an opportunity that could change your life. A future restored that afternoon, James found himself sitting in a penthouse office, staring in disbelief at the woman from the gas station, now clean, dressed in elegant clothes, her presence commanding. "I was never homeless, James," Olivia said, smiling warmly. "But I was lost. And in one moment of kindness, you reminded me of what truly matters." She leaned forward. "I want to help you the way you helped me. If you'll let me." James swallowed, emotions clogging his throat. By the time he walked out of that office, he had a job, a position at Olivia's company that would provide more than he had ever dreamed of. His days of struggling were over. But more than that, he had gained something priceless, the confirmation that kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change lives. And it had all started with a single $10 bill. James's heart raced as he walked back to his truck, the surreal weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had never imagined that a single act of kindness would lead him here, sitting in an upscale office, offered a chance to rebuild his life. He glanced down at the business card still clutched in his hand. The ink on the edges blurred slightly as his fingers trembled. He hadn't done it for recognition or reward. He hadn't even known her name. But now, his world was shifting in ways he could hardly grasp. His life was about to change, but how could he ever repay the woman who had changed his fate? As he pulled into his driveway, Emily ran out to meet him, her small figure bouncing with excitement. She had that way of lighting up a room, even on days when everything seemed dim. "Daddy! Daddy, you're home," she cried, throwing her arms around him. James scooped her up, holding her tight, his heart swelling with love. But even as he held her, the weight of the promise Olivia had made to him pressed on his chest. There was so much he wanted to do for Emily, to give her everything he hadn't been able to provide. But he knew that nothing would be as important as teaching her the lesson he had just learned, that kindness and compassion were the truest forms of wealth. "I have something important to tell you, sweetheart," James said, setting her down and kneeling in front of her. "What is it, Daddy?" Emily's bright blue eyes were full of curiosity. James smiled, his eyes misting over. "Today, something amazing happened. Someone helped me, no, they helped us. And because of that, things are going to get better. We're going to be okay, Emily." He told her the whole story, about the woman on the corner and how giving her that $10 bill had led to an unexpected chance. He promised her that, even though life was still unpredictable, they would never forget the lesson they had learned from that day, that true wealth isn't in money, but in the impact you have on others. Over the next few weeks, things began to change rapidly. James settled into his new role at Olivia's company, where he found himself not only doing the work he had always loved but also being mentored by Olivia herself. She was brilliant, driven, and, despite her wealth, profoundly humble. Her experiences had shaped her into a person who valued integrity and compassion over power and status. James's paychecks were no longer a source of stress. The bills that had once loomed over him were now manageable. But perhaps the greatest gift Olivia had given him wasn't just the job, it was the wisdom she shared with him about wealth and purpose. "You have to make your success count, James," she told him one afternoon as they sat in her office overlooking the city. "Money can buy comfort, but it's the lives you touch that truly make you rich. I don't just want to see you succeed, I want to see you help others." James nodded, feeling something shift inside him. He knew now what he wanted to do. A few months later, he started a community outreach program. He began by offering free car repairs to single mothers and veterans in need, making sure that those who had little could at least count on a vehicle that ran safely. What started as a small gesture soon expanded, as James rallied local businesses to join him in offering support to the community. It wasn't long before Olivia's influence began to spread, her belief in paying forward the kindness that had once been shown to her inspiring others to do the same. James would often find himself speaking at local events, sharing his story about a single moment of kindness that had turned his life upside down. He was no longer the struggling mechanic, he was a man with a purpose. But the most humbling part of all this was the way Emily had grown. One evening, as they sat together at the dinner table, Emily said something that made James's heart soar. "Daddy," she said, her eyes shining, "I want to help people too, like you do. Can we give someone our lunch tomorrow? Like the lady you helped?" James paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Of course, sweetheart. I think that's a wonderful idea." As he looked at his daughter, he realized that his act of kindness had not only changed his own life but had also planted the seeds of compassion in the next generation. His heart swelled with pride as he saw in her the same spirit of giving that had once saved him. In the years that followed, James and Emily continued to live by the lesson that Olivia had taught him, that the true measure of success isn't found in bank accounts or possessions, but in the hearts you touch and the lives you change. And as for Olivia, she never stopped offering support, not just in business, but in life. She had given James more than just a job, she had restored his faith in humanity. In return, he had gone on to help countless others, proving that even the smallest act of kindness can set off a chain of events that lasts a lifetime. James had come to understand one simple truth: true wealth is measured not by what you have, but by what you give.